Okay, so we're back. We're going to continue working on our tip calculator. We've added an edit text and we've added a seek bar. The other thing we want to add to our seek bar is we want to add the default, like when the app loads, what should it be set at? So if we set the progress, this is basically what the default when our activity loads, where should it be set at? So if our min is 20 and min or 10 and max is 20, we want the default to be right in the middle at 15. So we'll add that as well. So those are our inputs, and now we need some text views for our outputs. These are regular text views, kind of the equivalent of HTML labels. They're used for displaying text, but users don't interact with them. So they're not input controls. So we're going to add 4 of these because we want to display the word tip and then have the amount show beside it. And then we want another label that says total, and that is going to update as well with the value as we change either the amount of the input or we change the seek bar. So we're going to need 4 text views. I'm going to go back to text, and I'm going to drag 4 separate text views. These are basically just labels. And Android Studio should name them text view 2, 3, 4. So I want to put the first one I'm going to name, I'll call it text view tip. We'll call that text view tip. And then we'll set up some constraints around it. We're going to need to set, so our text, it defaults to the word text view. So we're going to change that and create a new string resource. So I'm going to click the little rectangle here. I'm going to create a new string value. The resource name will be tip. And the value will be tip and I'll click OK. So we want this text view to appear here underneath the seek bar, but maybe aligned kind of with the left. So I'm going to go back into my code and we'll add some constraints. So on this text view tip, we'll set the start to the start of our edit text amount. So this will align the lefts. So our text input at the top will be left aligned with our label. And then we'll set the top, we'll set the top to the bottom of our seek bar. So the label will align with our edit text, and it's going to appear below the seek bar. Our second text view that's going to be used to actually display the amount of the tip, it's going to go beside it. It's going to go to the right. So we're going to have 2 text views kind of in the same row. So we're going to change this one. We can just do this all in the XML. This one's going to be called text view tip amount. We'll take out any text on this because here the text is going to change dynamically. It's going to display a value, which will eventually format as currency. So there's no default text on here. Basically, the user won't see anything until there's a tip amount to be calculated. So we're going to set the end. So we're going to right align this one with our amount. Edit text. And again, we'll set the top to the bottom of our seek bar. So if we go and look, tip, the word tip now appears here, and our text view tip amount, it's now over here. We're going to do a similar thing with our last two text views. We want a label that says total. It's going to appear underneath the label that says tip. And then we want our total amount text view to appear under our tip amount text view. So let's go and do that as well. So my third text view is going to be called text view total. I'm going to change the text on it to, I'm going to use another string resource because I add string total. This turns red because we don't have this string resource. So if I mouse over it, Android Studio says we can't resolve this symbol, but it allows me to create. I could hit Alt Enter, or I could just hit Alt Shift Enter. I'm going to create a new string value resource called total. And this will say total. We're going to constrain it. So the start will be to the start of, also aligned with our edit text at the top. And the bottom, it's going to go below our text view tip. So below the tip label. So now the word total, oops, I need to move it. I didn't put it quite the right spot. Oh, sorry. This should be the top is to the bottom of. The top of the total label is below the tip view label. So now we get input, seek bar, tip, and total. And we now need to just move this final text view over here. So I'm going to take out the text property. I'm going to call this text view total amount. We'll remove the text property because it's going to be updated dynamically with our Kotlin code. So our end will be to the end of our edit text. So we're going to right align those. And again, the top is to the bottom of our seek bar. So now our constraint warnings go away. And here's how we look. Input text, tip percentage, and then tip total with two empty text views here. I'll actually push this code up to GitHub in case you need to reference it. So this is lesson 3. This is our initial UI. So give me a minute, I will publish this in case you got a little lost. Oops. Okay, so the code is pushed. If you need the XML, you can get it under app source, main, got to drill way down, resource, layout. Here's my activity main. And if you click raw, you can get I will just throw this in the chat in case you need to get any of the XML. So I'm going to reload my activity, make sure that it looks okay. I think we should also maybe add a little bit of padding to these views. They're kind of all jammed together. So maybe we'll use our dimens file to set up default padding, and then we can add that padding to all of our views, which will space them out a little bit. So here's how it looks. Our tip amount and total amount, those are kind of invisible right now. So we should add some padding to these. So I'm going to create another dimension resource for this. I also, the text views, these text size is small, so we'll maybe also use another resource to make those bigger. So we're going to go back to our dimens file, add a couple resources here, and then we'll add those into the UI. So I'm going to go to my dimens. We'll create two new values here. We'll call this one label size. And because this is for text, we're going to use SP, scale independent pixels, not DP. So let's set the label size at 18 SP. You want your labels to be bigger? That's fine. I'll also create a default padding, and I'll set that at maybe, I don't know, 10 dp. So I'm going to add these two resources. And then we're going to apply the label size to our tip and total text views, and we're going to apply this default padding basically to everything, because the views are squished together. So add lines 4 and 5 to your dimens.xml. And now I'm going to apply these. So for each one of these, I'm going to apply padding, and we will use our default padding dimension. So I'm going to copy that attribute to all of these elements. Our edit text, our seek bar, as well as our 4 text views. So that way, if we want to change the padding, we just change it in the dimens file. We don't have to update every control. So I'm going to restart my app. We should see that things spread out a little bit. So that looks better, spread out. I also want to use the label size dimension on my tip and total labels to make these text larger. So on my text view tip, we're going to set the text size to our label size dimension. So that'll set the text size to 18. I'm going to do the same thing on my text view total. So text size equal to our label size. I'll apply the changes. I needed to restart before because I created new resources. When you just do apply changes, so now this text is bigger. So that's most of the UI. There's actually one other thing we missed, was we may want a text view to actually display the current value, the current tip percentage. We know we set it up from 10 to 20%, but a user is going to slide this around. They're not actually going to know what the scale is. Is this 10 to 20? Is it 0 to 100? It's not actually obvious. So underneath our seek bar, we think we need a text that will update as we're sliding this along. So I'm going to go back and add one more text view. We'll have to move a few things around. So underneath our seek bar, I'm just going to do this in the XML. I'm going to add a new text view. Our width and height will just wrap content. Our ID is going to be text view tip percent. We're going to center this. So our start to start of parent, our end to end of parent, our top is to the bottom of our seek bar. Now I've created one little problem for ourselves here, which is, we'll also set the text size as our label percentage. So it's also 18 SP. Let's add our padding. It's our default padding as well. We also will add some default text here. We're going to create a resource called tip percent, which doesn't exist. So we're going to have to create this. So it's going to default to 15%. So when our activity loads, this text view should say 15%. And then we're going to write code as the user moves the seek bar, the value on this label is going to update. They scroll all the way to the right, it's going to say 20. They scroll all the way to the left, it's going to say 10. So I'm going to create a new resource here called tip%. So it's going to default to 15%. So this appears under the seek bar. The only problem is we were anchoring these two under the seek bar. So I've got to change these constraint. The text view tip and text view tip amount shouldn't have put them underneath the seek bar. I need to put them underneath our text view tip%. So I'm going to change those constraints. So our text view tip% and text view tip, our text view tip and text view tip amount go underneath the text view tip%. I created a new string resource, so I got to restart the app. And we should get a little text view here that's defaults to 15%. There, so it says 15. Right now it doesn't change, but we'll write some Kotlin code. We'll write an event handler so that when the user changes this percentage is going to update automatically. So now I think we're ready to write some code. So we'll deal with changing the seek bar second. First, what we want to do is write some code that when we enter an amount here, as soon as we change the text, we want to take this value, we want to multiply it by the seek bar value to get the tip, and then we want to add the numbers together to display the total in these two labels. So we're going to go into our Kotlin window to do that. And this is in our onCreate. When the activity is created, we're going to set up these event handlers. So we want to write an add text changed listener. Now it doesn't know what my edit text is, so I'm just going to do an import. So what we want is an add text change listener. We're going to call this first method which is using an object called a text watcher. So this observes text for changes. So we're going to import the reference. And we're going to override the method handlers for the add text change listener. Piyush, your mic is on. So we want to override the after text change, but we're primarily concerned with the on text changed. Event. So we're going to check the sequence of characters. So when our text is changed, sorry, I forgot to declare, we need some variables up at the top here. We need 4 variables. And these have got to go at the class level. So they're going to be global in the class. I'm sorry. So we're going to create amount. We'll set up our variables for calculation. We've got our amount. We've got our tip percentage. We've got the tip amount. And we've got the total. So we're going to initialize each of these to 0. I'm going to take out this listener and put it back in a minute. Android Studio should be giving us the method signature. We'll try this again. So edit text amount dot. Here's why. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to put in the method signature, and then Android Studio is going to say we haven't implemented the member. So if I click implement members, I want to implement all of these. So I'm going to choose all 3. And now we've overridden, we've got the 3 overrides. Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll also go through the process again. So basically, because this is an edit text, it has these, we can inherit from we can override these methods. So that's how we can write our event handlers. So by calling the change listener, it uses this object called a text watcher. It observes the text value. So when I try to call this listener, it's telling us that we need to implement the methods involved in order to listen for the text changes. So if I mouse over this, I get implement members. So it's saying you can't call this listener without implementing before text changed. So we have to override with our own code these event handlers. We're not really concerned with before text or after text. What we want is the on text changed. So this is tracking the sequence of characters to look at what was the original text and what character change was made to it. So we're overriding the event handler with our custom code. So in on text changed, we want to check if our amount isn't empty, we want to read the current value in this text, edit text, and update our amount variable here. So we're going to say our amount is equal to, and we can actually write an if statement here in case it's empty. So if it's not empty, we're going to use our edit text amount dot text. And first we've got to convert it to a string and then to a double. Otherwise, our amount is a 0. Lastly, we need a separate function that's going to calculate the tip and the total. So outside of our onCreate method, we're going to create a function so this will calc and display tip and total amounts. That's part of the event handler. So if we want, we can implement handlers for before or after. We're not using them, but that's the signature of the event listener. So we have to override those methods, even if we don't put any code in those overrides. So Kartik, if I comment out before text, I think it's going to complain. So if I comment that out, it says, you're not implementing this event handler because the event handler has to override a before text change event. Even if we don't do anything, it has to have that method signature. So you see, as soon as I commented that out, I get this error telling me we're not properly implementing the handler. So we have to override it with all of the sort of sub-event handlers here, even if we don't do anything before or after. So our calculate, we'll say tip equals our amount times our tip percent, and our total will just be our amount plus our tip. So we've calculated those amounts, but now we need to display them back to the UI. So we'll set tip amount. We can say tip dot to string and total amount. So this should, when we change the text now, as long as the value of our amount isn't empty, it should calculate and display our tip. Let's try this. It won't be complete. There'll be a couple other things we want to do with it. It says adding or removing field requires a restart. So instead of applying the changes, I'll restart. Okay, so why did our app crash? Let's see. So I'll go down to my logcat. Okay. The reason is because we've got to take out these to-dos. It won't run, so I've actually got to take those lines or comment them out. So these event handlers can be empty, but they've got to be here. So I'll run my app again. We'll see, Kartik. I don't think so. I think we'll have to do the math, actually. I think we'll have to do it, so we'll see. Oh, we never called the function. So amount, we've got to call calculate. So set the amount and call calculate. Yeah, I don't think, I think we will have to divide by 100, but we'll just restart. We'll also want to format it as currency. There, so right now, okay, my labels, I've got to move my labels down. Whoops. I set my tip percent, I defaulted it to 0. So the tip percent should default to 0.15. I also need to move these down. So we'll declare our default tip percentage as 15. So you'll notice here, okay, not quite right. So yes, we do need to divide by 100 when we're calculating the tip, right? So we'll go back. So we'll divide by 100 in our calculation. We'll try that again. I also need to still move the top of this. Okay, so okay, I'm confused because I've got these labels in the wrong place. So I need to move this label down here. So my text view total amount has got to go to the bottom of my tip percentage. That's part of the issue. My label's in the wrong place. And our logic's not quite right. We're almost there. Once we get the logic right here, we'll then add the code on our seek bar. So tip amount, oops, sorry. Text view total amount has to be underneath text view tip amount. I had them overlapping. Okay. So I actually, here, it's showing 0.15. So we'll actually use currency formatting in here. Yeah, I don't need to divide it. But what we want to do is use currency formatting. That'll actually show it in the right way. So we'll do this. We'll add then we can use this to render both values. So in here, we'll use our currency format, and we'll call the format method. We'll do the same thing here. You are right, Alan. Thank you. The format should take care of it, not displaying as 0.15. So now it displays numerically. Okay, sorry for the pain. Would have been easier to just add the currency format in the beginning. So as I update my amount, my tip and total update automatically. Now we haven't dealt with the seek bar yet. Notice I'm doing this, nothing changes. If I take out my amount, just sets everything back to 0. Yes, thanks for your patience. I'm sorry, it's been a long week. So now we need an event handler on our seek bar that is going to change this value as we move it, and also will recalculate anytime we move the seek bar. So in our onCreate, we wrote and overrode this text change listener. We're going to need to do a similar thing with the seek bar. We're going to need a change listener for the seek bar. So when tip percentage is changed, so again, I'm going to want to import So we want to set the on seek bar change listener. So when I do this, just make sure I got the right name. Did we call it seek bar tip? Oh, we just called it seek bar. I'm sorry, I should have called it seek bar tip. I'm not going to rename it now. So we want to use this set on seek bar change listener. That takes a and again, we're going to need to override. So we're going to implement the members as we did for our edit text. So we've got 3 methods here: on start tracking, on stop tracking, and we're interested in the on progress changed. So I'm going to choose all 3. Here it's saying we should be extending. This is about compatibility with previous Android versions in order for it to recognize this seek bar. So I'll just accept that. Whoops. I'll just import the members. So we're going to comment out the start tracking and stop tracking overrides. We don't need them. But on our progress changed, we want to get the current value of the seek bar and then call calculate. So if our edit text is empty, we don't want to do anything. So the user loads the form, there's no value in the amount, and they start moving the seek bar, we just want to return. Otherwise, we'll want to set the label, our text view tip percent, to the current value of the seek bar. That's this P1 parameter. That gives us the current value. So if they drag it all the way to the right, we want this label here to say 20%. They drag it all the way to the left, it should update to say 10%. And then we're going to update the current percentage, which will be the seek bar value divided by 100. Then we'll call calculate, which is going to come down and figure out and display the tip and total amounts. So as they move the seek bar, we're going to check that there is an amount. If there is, we're going to update our tip percentage label. We're going to set the new percentage as our seek bar value divided by 100. And then we're going to calculate and display the new values. So we'll apply those changes. So if I move my seek bar right now, nothing happens because the bill amount is empty. So now we'll try to move the seek bar. So as I move it, you'll notice both the tip. So three things change when we drag it. Our label here changes, and our tip and total calculations change. If there's nothing here, then changing, this does nothing. So sorry for the struggles through that. You wouldn't think I went over all of this yesterday just to make sure I had it working, but I did. So we need to override when we're using the built-in event handlers. We need to override the definitions and the signatures of these event handlers. So for a text change or a seek bar change, we'll always have to override. We don't have to write code in all of the methods, just the events that we want in this case. If I rotate my device, we can see our calculator takes a minute, it gets destroyed, and then it comes back. So there's our little calculator. We're going to do one more quick thing today, not with the calculator, but I said we just wanted to have a look at some of the other activities. We're just going to add one more activity to this app quickly. And then next week we'll get into intents, which allow us to navigate from one activity to another or to invoke other apps on the phone, like the browser, the phone, email, etc. So I'm going to click on File, and I'm going to add a new activity. And I'm going to pick a basic activity. So this is a little bit different. So I'm going to call this one Basic Activity. So you can see the template. It actually comes with a toolbar, a back arrow, a settings button, as well as this button. So create a basic activity. I know it's almost 1. We're only going to be about 5-10 more minutes. So Android Studio creates this, but it's going to be a little different. It's a little more complex. So one of the things I think Hayden mentioned down in the Miro board was, how do we build sort of nested pieces to activities? So the basic activity is, pardon me, one of the most common ways that we do this. So if we look at our basic activity, we do have a Kotlin file. And we've got this find view by ID. And it's mentioning this object called the floating action button. Well, where is our floating action button? If we go down to the resources, you notice for our activity main, we just had this one single XML file. But for our basic activity, it's added a whole bunch of new files to our project. Here's our activity basic. And in here, it's got a toolbar. And then it kind of injects in the middle a separate layout file called content basic. So, Hayden, I don't know if you're in class today, you're watching this later, to answer your question. So this is the basic activity is basically partials. So we have this toolbar, and then we have the content that gets injected in the middle of the activity. So if you look at the designer, there's not actually anything here, just the toolbar. Our content basic, there's nothing here. So this is just the entrance. Maybe I'll put a text view on. If I add a text view up at the top. When we open this activity, it'll just say text view. We also have these other files, these fragment first and fragment second. So it's got a text view and button on here. So we're not using these right now, but it's kind of already designed in pieces. And then in the code window, we've got this floating action button. So that button shows up. We don't actually see it, but it's got this name of fab, F-A-B. And when we click it, it's got some default code we can override. So let's just see what this looks like. Now our activity's running right now, our app's running right now, and it's loading the main activity. Right now we have no way to navigate to the basic activity. We'll do that next week. How could we change our app so if we restart it, it'll start the basic activity instead of our main activity? Where would we go in the project to change the startup activity? Anybody want to put a suggestion in the chat? How can we get our basic activity to run? Yep, you got it, CDRM. So under manifests and Android manifest, so here's our basic activity. If I move this intent filter out of the main activity, I'll just cut it. If I paste that inside the XML node of the basic activity, if I run my app now, rather than displaying our main activity with our tip calculator, it's going to display the basic activity template. And we'll make a couple quick changes to the basic activity. If it doesn't, Misam, you may not have added the basic activity. So you have to click on File and choose New Activity, and then we picked Basic Activity. You may have missed that step. The main activity is always there by default, but I've added the basic activity. So I'm going to let my app restart. Instead of bringing up the tip calculator, it should load our new basic activity, and we'll make a few small changes to it, and then we'll pause for today. So we'll wait for the app to run. And instead of our tip calculator, here's our text view. It says basic activity. And we get this little button down here, this floating action button. And when I click it, it says replace with your own action. Yes, I will always be changed. I always will push at the end of class, for sure, Delano. So when you click, it says replace with your own action. If we look at the Kotlin code, the snack bar is kind of similar to a toast. Snackbar.make, except instead of sitting over top of the message sitting over top of the activity, it kind of allocates space. So let's make a few little changes to this floating action button in this activity. On line 16, let's change the message here. It is Friday and class is almost over. Going to make that change and apply those changes. Then I'm going to change the look of my button, and I'm going to change the title of the activity as well. So now when I click it, my new snack bar message shows up here. So let's change the title at the top, and let's change both the icon and the color of our button. So if I go to my activity basic layout, actually first I'll go back to my Android manifest. Our label says basic activity. If I click it, it automatically generates a string resource. Notice this changed automatically for me. I didn't write string title activity basic. So if I go back to my strings, Android Studio automatically added this title activity basic. I want to put a space in here so the title's more readable. By default, whatever we called the class file, that's also the title that appears in the title bar. By changing it in the string resource, I'm going to put in a space. And then if I go into we'll just do it maybe in the code view of our XML. So if I go to activity basic, I'm going to change a few options on my floating action button. Notice Android Studio actually shows us the little white email icon. So I'm going to change the look of this. I'm going to set the background to, let's say, I'll pick a darker color. So color, design default, color background. Now that's white. I don't want color background. We'll pick something else. We'll pick maybe a error color, which will make my button red. And instead of the email, I'll pick maybe an info icon. So there's a whole bunch of icons that come, and we'll look at the material design palette. Next week, I'll actually show you this link. So now I get an info button that's red. So I'll restart my activity. And then there's a link I want to point you to on Blackboard before I let you go in terms of thinking about your app design. So now when my app loads, we should see some visual changes. It says basic activity with a space. I've got the info button. I didn't pick the right, whoops, this isn't the right color. So my icon's changed. think I want is it color? We'll pick color. I think it may be background, the background tint attribute I need to set rather than the background attribute. Yep, so that turns it red. So you don't have to pick all of the colors that you want for your assignment app, but I'm just going to show you a resource on Blackboard, and then I will let you go. It's in Tools and Resources. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to run. I'm not going to be able to stick around for questions today. But in Tools and Resources, there's a link here to the material palettes. So there's icons from Android you can use. You can see the Android icon sets. If you go to Material Palette, you can pick some colors. So maybe I want, like a purple and a blue-gray. If you choose two colors, the Material Palette gives you the hex values you can pick. You can even download this as a palette. So this will help you choose a color scheme. You don't have to have figured out your color scheme, but it also previews of what it will look like as an Android app. Okay, so you can play around with this and get a sense. You can use this, but yeah, great resource. So that's here, and the icon sets are under material.io, which is from Google. So you can see all of the icons that come, and you can download, but a lot of them are built right into Android Studio already, and there's different versions. You can have the outline versions, the rounded, the two-tone. My GitHub is public, so anybody can access what I put on GitHub in class. It's not private, so there shouldn't be any access requests. Okay, so I'm going to push what we've done today so you can explore those design resources, think about your app, get some inspiration. And so for next week, it's just the quiz on this week's class, and then your assignment 1B, your mockups, your collections, and your application shell on GitHub. If you have other questions, feel free to book an office hours appointment for Tuesday. I'm going to push everything to Git right now. Okay, have a great week, everyone. See you next week.